My guest today is Nigel Sarbutts, founder of the PR Cavalry, which is the freelance PR matchmaking platform, and Structured Mediation, helping comms and creative businesses resolve disputes before they turn toxic. He's run agencies across London, Manchester and Leeds, and is also the co-founder of the Independent Impact 50, which is spotlighting influence of PR freelancers within our industry. Nigel, welcome. Thank you for coming in. You describe freelancing within our sector as a megatrend. What is driving that at this point?
I think it's the principal driver would be the shift from retainer fees to project fees, which has been, is a megatrend, has been going on for years, is continuing to go on. And so you've got fluidity or volatility, shall I say, in terms of what clients, I think in terms of agencies now, but what clients are expecting from their agencies, that there's a shift from the steady Eddie retainer fee, which was predictable through the year, but you've also got volatility in what clients are asking of their agencies. So, for example, when I last ran an agency some years ago, I could predict the revenue throughout the year. I'd know that there was a retainer that maybe flexed a wee bit during the course of the year, but it was a steady number. And that is shifting in terms of, what clients are spending when during the year, and shifting more to project fees rather than retainers. But also those days, I could probably confidently predict that maybe 90% of the work behind that fee was going to be media relations. Now, clearly, media relations continues to be a huge part of the PR output of agencies, despite what some agencies would they seem to think of media relations as somehow old-fashioned or traditional, which is I find bizarre. But aside from that, maybe that 90% of the fee would have been media relations. Now it may be 60%, and the balance is taken up by content creation. Could be video, could be audio, it could be data analysis, data crunching. So the mix of what clients are demanding of their agencies is changing all the time, and the idea of you just have a big fee for media relations is no longer the case. And that presents a problem if you're running an agency of saying, well, the staff that walk through our door every Monday are, it's the same overhead against volatile revenues. That's a problem. How do you match those two competing interests, but also volatility in terms of what clients want? And if you've got the same skills walking through the door on a Monday morning, then what you offer to clients is necessarily constrained by what you've got available to you. And that presents a problem.
What do you hear? So you kind of sit in this unique position as supporting the freelance network. What do you hear from freelancers? Like, how is that industry growing, thriving, bubbling, challenged? What are the kind of the issues and the upswings of it at the moment?
There's two or three things. I mean, obviously you've got a lot of consolidation in the big agency networks, which is causing, there are redundancies for sure. I get a lot of phone calls from people saying, I've lost my job or I'm about to lose my job. I can see, the writing on the wall. Should I go freelance? Should I not? And, we can talk about the freelance mentality, the freelance mindset, because I think that's an important thing to consider. So you've got that. I think, fees are also under pressure. The idea of doing more for less has always been an issue in PR. That's not a new thing, but clearly AI is causing pressure on fees, and that's been reflected in what clients are paying freelancers as well. Some of the fees out there are, they're not good. Some of them. I'm very happy to challenge clients who come onto the platform.
Yeah, I've seen it.
People who come on the platform and want the moon on the stick for, silly money are politely challenged. And if we can't find a way to work together or whatever, then, unfortunately we have to say, you'll have to go elsewhere, because I need to protect my reputation with the freelance cohort as well. I won't let a piece of work or a brief go on the platform, which is clearly unreasonable. And I mean, I had a pretty senior comms person come on the platform. This is a business that employs literally hundreds of thousands of people around the world. And they wanted to promote a new division in the UK, and they had a fee of £1,000 to do it. And so I politely challenged them. They couldn't understand that challenge. And so we just said, I'm not prepared to, I will not let that go through. But what's interesting is how many times clients, perhaps, brand managers or SME owners will come on the platform and they will have an unrealistic expectation of fees and whatever, and I'll politely challenge, and they'll go, thank you, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And very quickly, you'll double, treble the fee that they had in mind.
Yep.
Simply by just informing them. And I think there are still a lot of organizations that have not used PR before, and they need that education. They need to be, shown that PR people are not just mailmen. They don't just post stuff out to the media and results happen, that it's a strategic communications activity that needs to be taken seriously, and that the best advice comes from somebody that has got deep experience of their market and can say, in my experience, this is how you should do it. And clients do value that.
I completely agree. It's astonishing. I mean, the £1,000 could have been such a great opportunity for your brand, though.
I've been in this game too long to be nice to people that adore that kind of crazy thing. I mean, this person was based in the US, so
different mindset.
But fees in the US are far higher than the UK. So I couldn't understand the mindset at all. And so, I said, sorry.
Not the one.
No,
not the one.
We can't work together.
You've argued that independent practitioners collectively dwarf big agencies in scale, right? But not in recognition. Why is that? Why are we still so badge led? What's going on there?
I mean, there are, depending on who you believe, there are around about 8,000 freelancers in the UK market. Some of them more active than others, clearly. And that comes from CIPR, PRCA numbers. We have around 2,500 in the PR Cavalry, so we've got a good chunk of them. There is no brand name recognition. There's no Ketchum, there's no Fleischmann, there's no Weber, there's no, the brand names aren't there. They're individual practices. So it's difficult to, I'm not blaming Provoke or PR Week or whatever for this, because they haven't got a brand name to latch onto, so it's a little bit harder to report on a sector. Mm-hmm. But collectively, if you, again, drawing on CIPR, PRCA and ONS figures, the freelance marketplace is roughly 500 million in fees per annum. So, it is a substantial amount of money. So, 500 million. I mean, don't challenge me on how much the top 20 agencies bill each year, but I don't think they bill 500 million. So, it is a bigger market than the top 20 agencies, but obviously distributed across thousands and thousands of very small businesses. So, it is diffuse. And that was really one of the penny drop moments for me when I created the PR Cavalry, is that you've got this huge talent pool, 8,000 odd freelancers, but their skills, their experience is not codified. And that's what set out to do, is make it easy for people to find that unicorn that may never come into their network. The person who can absolutely nail the brief could be in Dundee or Devon, and they simply won't come onto the radar of that client, whether that's an agency or a brand owner. It's like, how do you find these people? That one that absolutely understands what you do and can take a brief and knock it out of the park. And that was the challenge, to codify thousands of people's skill sets into a way that a system can understand.
You've created the Independent 50 with Rod Cartwright. How and where does that come from?
I'll be a bit
This is a safe space. This is a safe space.
It came out of Rod and I know each other, and we were talking, and it came out of a kind of a little pay drop moment to think that the PR week has its power book. Fabulous thing. I've seen it once a long time ago, but as far as I know, there's never been a freelancer in there, and I think that speaks to a little bit what you were saying about brand recognition. Is that, if you're looking for who are the most powerful people in PR, then it's easy to identify them if they're head of or managing director of organizations that people know and recognize and understand. Whereas it's difficult to find those very powerful, high impact individuals because they are trading a little bit out of the spotlight that they don't get reported on. So I'm not blaming PRW PowerBook for that, but it just seemed like it's such a kind of crazy thing that you've got really good people doing high impact work, not because of whose name is over the door or whose name is on their business card, but because of who they are, because of the quality of the work that they're doing, the impact, the importance that client has on their work. And so that's what we did. It was like, well, this is an obvious thing to do, that create an awards scheme which celebrates and spotlights not necessarily campaign work, because it's difficult for one freelancer to be 100% ownership of an entire campaign that is significantly or big enough to register as an award winner. But work that has disproportionate impact on the people around them. And that could be one person having a relationship with a CEO, where they are, that genuine strategic advisor, that genuine trusted advisor that is guiding an organization through an individual relationship, one-on-one relationship. Or it could be that person has an impact on the wider industry. So, that they are great mentors of the skills coming into the industry. Or it could be that they are campaigning around things like ageism in the industry or diversity and inclusion. And there's tremendous work being done by freelancers in that space. It's not client work particularly, but what they're doing is professionalizing the industry, bringing the industry up, and it's a way of putting the spotlight on those people, and to a smaller degree, and hopefully this is something that the awards will do over time, is become a focal point for that idea of a brand name. That if you want to understand what's going on in the freelance sector, if you want a kind of rallying point for what is good in that third sector, agency, in-house, and the third sector of freelance independent practice, that where do you go to find that out? Well, the awards, the Independent 50 is a place to do that. It's a brand name for that category.
What does it mean for the people what does it mean both in terms of, obviously I'm sure it's emotional to win. It's nice, it's lovely to win an award, right? I secretly think, not secretly, openly think that actually the win is the nomination now. The actual picking of a trophy also means you have to go and eat that kind of ropey looking chicken, and I've got better things to do with my time on an evening, right? No offense. But what does it mean to the people, both emotionally but also impact on their business, to be named in this 50?
I think it's two things. One is that you talked about the nomination. We don't really have kind of shortlists, or we all get those. Suddenly you open LinkedIn, it's like happy to be nominated. Yeah. It's like for the next 2 days, all you'll see is we've been nominated in 28 categories. You're like, fabulous, well done you.
I'm sorry, that was me a few years ago.
You do enough on the awards. But so you've got that noise that goes on. So we don't have that. You are either you submit your entry and you're either one of the 50 winners or you're not. Binary. But what a lot of entrants have said to us is that the process of entering has been really useful, because we ask about impact. We don't ask, give us an example of a campaign you run. It says, client X had this problem, my strategy was this, the results were this. That very segmented, standard way of doing an awards. Because we ask for quite nuanced things around impact, which, as I say, could be, a great example of that could be, I've worked with this client for 3 or 4 years, over a period of time, and rather than being a campaign, but in that time, I've taken them on a journey of professionalizing their PR, they started by saying, Dave, get us in the papers, in that kind of very basic, simplistic way of thinking about PR. And over time, that individual has taken them on a journey to say, no, it's actually more important than this. This is a strategic thing. This is about your behaviors, not just what we put into a press release. So those things talk about impact, and actually just thinking about your work through the lens of impact is very, very powerful. Because if you meet people and you say, oh, what do you do? So, I do this kind of work for these kind of people.
Yeah,
great, very vanilla way of thinking about what you do. But if you think about, what I do is this, and the impact it has on those organizations is this, you're now telling a story. And people kind of lean in and say, wow, that's interesting. I can see how that can reflect on
what I do.
The problems I have or whatever. I can see some connection with what you're doing to my circumstance, in a way that's saying, I work with 10 baked bean companies and I do CSR and event management, and fine, it's hard to put your own story into that. Whereas you're talking about impact in that more nuanced way and saying, I do this work and it has this impact, you're telling a story. And loads of the freelancers that we work with have said, just thinking about my work in that way, not only is a different way of talking about what I do, but also it's made me think about stuff that, I'd forgotten. Damn. Or it's made me reappraise my work in terms of its value to people around me, not just the results of a campaign. And that has been really helpful to them to tell stories to potential clients, to position their offer to prospects in a very powerful way. So it's commercially very powerful. It's also just great fun. I mean, you were a bit dismissive about the rubber chicken dinners. We've all gone to them. We have afternoon tea.
I love that.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah,
that's the best one I ever went to. The best, apart from the ones during COVID, they were great because you could watch Netflix and then unmute for it. But the best ones we went to, there was one here and it was 45 minutes.
Yeah.
It was a dream.
So we don't have, next up is best freelancer called Jane. It's just like, you're one of 50. You come in, you're already a winner. You come into this amazing, buzzing room full of people where people go, oh my God, this is my tribe. We're in the dark. Freelancers are these Cinderellas that are not credited very often in award schemes. They're not very often credited by the clients in, if there's a big win or stuff like that. It's like, well, the freelancer was integral to that. And yet somehow they don't get invited to the other awards.
No.
And that's a great shame. So, freelancers, independents are kind of these Cinderellas that, are doing brilliant work, but out of the spotlight. I mean, the awards event last year came just after the Missing Women report by PRCA, which, very powerful piece of work. And you look around the room and Maya Sims at Provoke. Provoke is our media partner. She stood up and she brought the house down because she just stood up and said, we're all talking about missing women. Well, here they are, guys. And you looked around the room, and of the 50 winners, probably 40 were women, and women probably in the second half of their careers. And, these are the people that have left the industry. Oh, sorry, they've not left the industry. They have left agency roles.
Confines of the current,
Or they've left in-house roles because for a number of reasons, they felt they were no longer valued in the way that they should be. And I can tell you that, yes, I've been to a lot of rubbish awards dinners with rubber chickens and everyone getting, absolutely off their faces. And, they're miserable. And everyone's forgotten, immediately who won anything. It's like, what was all that for? But the energy in that room was electric. Of people going, God, we're here, we're doing great work. And like I say, this is my tribe. People are saying, I've heard of you, and I can come and talk to you. And it's not competitive because, you know, you get a bunch of agency people in the room or in a conversation, and they're thinking like, whose client can I pinch? Whose people can I pinch? Or thinking it's, you know, it's about the corporate ladder, you know, how can I get a better job out of this? You know, there's a lot of self-interest. Whereas freelancers, yes, they're in business, but there isn't that competitive, you know, you put 5-10 freelancers in a room, particularly if they've, you know, they've been trading quite a while, they've got a good network, they've got a good referral network. They're not going to there going, well, if, you know, whose clients can I nick off you? It's about the work, not about self-advancement with freelancers in a way that, you know, well, I used to run agencies, so it was deeply competitive.
Something there.
You were always thinking, you know, how can I pinch that client off that agency, or how can I pinch that account manager, that account director, because they're great. You know, I've just seen them go off and get best thing, whatever. You're thinking, oh, you know, they're on my list. And, you know, rivalry is good, of course, but within freelancers, it's much more about the work.
I think there's a difference. I remember talking in a previous episode about the rivalries that we have. And what I've come to learn is that the biggest rivalry I have is with myself. And you're only as good as the last thing that you have just done. Yeah. And we have, it's really interesting because this year, so we're in this interesting bubble where we partner up with people, and often our work will be badged up as we are the freelancer, right? We're not part of that thing. Yeah. So I've got a tally of the amount of awards that we've won that we haven't won, and it is what it. No, do you know what? The thing is, we work hard, and there are partners that we go in with, and we go for these things, and we've won plenty. We've won plenty, right? Yeah. Fine. But my concern has been that actually we're a minnow, right?
Yeah.
But we're at least a minnow.
Yeah.
There are people that I don't know what goes underneath a minnow. I'm not a fish expert, right?
Okay.
Something underneath.
Yeah.
Effectively, the power to be able to say, hold on, I matter. What I'm doing matters too, and what I'm doing has power and importance to this overarching piece of work. And I have spoken to the main awards groups within our industry to challenge this, because I feel that there has to be a better way of attribution, of making that trophy, right, or the thing that you get, whether it's the award, you can take my ticket, right? That whether it's that night, the recognition that your work has fed into this thing, I think has to be better represented in our industry. And this was really before I looked into it, into the impact thing. But with a view of, actually, we are this big, and we need to be speaking up for the people that are smaller than us.
Yeah.
And if everyone's doing that and looking out for the person smaller than them, then we should be in a good place. That's kind of what I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
That hasn't happened, and so this year we are not going in for any, because I think that it does matter. I think that it does make a difference, and we do have to change the bit of the industry that means. And I think genuinely, I think it can be done really simply. I think if it just requires proper attribution, doesn't need 475,000 people on a stage, I won't go. But in a sense, if somebody wants to be able to be part of it and to claim a trophy and have that in the back of their shot when they're talking to a prospective client, knowing what that symbolizes and that means, that's vital, right? Isn't it?
Yeah. I think that's a solid argument, and I think it comes down to is the contribution of the freelancer integral or peripheral to the success of the campaign? And it's up to the campaign owner, whether that's a brand owner, the in-house department, or an agency, to have that frank conversation with the freelancers to say, thank you for your work. It added 2% to the success of the campaign.
Yeah.
Or thank you for the work. We couldn't have done it without you. Half the results came out of what you did. Clearly you've got a scale there. And if you just both agree and say, yeah, my work or my contribution was integral to the success, then great. There should be that name recognition, and it should be something that both sides can be grown up about and say, yeah, we hired that person because they have skills that we don't have in-house. For whatever reason, we choose not to have those skills in-house. So we go out to the market and we buy it in. And I'll just get on my soapbox here a little bit about why PR agencies seem to think that freelancers are this dirty little secret.
Right.
That it's a sign of weakness to hire a freelancer. And if you go and talk to, a big engineering business or a big construction business, or even go to Hollywood, the Hollywood model is freelancers come together. Steven Spielberg goes and hires the best sound guy, woman, person, whatever, best camera person, the best producer, obviously the best cast. They don't all work for Steven Spielberg. They're not employees. It's just like, yeah, Hollywood does it. Why do PR people think that other industries don't do this? If you, as I say, go to big engineering business, they have to build, a new thing in south of France for a client, a new retail park or whatever. They don't have those skills necessarily in-house. They'll have the project management skills, but the actual delivery partners are just brought together in joint ventures.
Yeah.
It's just a natural way of doing business. Why PR has to think of those external skills that you don't need, you can't justify to have on the payroll full-time as being something you hide from a client,
but is it,
or pretend that doesn't exist?
Is it because it's almost being thought of as arms and legs, rather than skills buying?
Yeah, I mean, it just seems an obvious thing to say that, if you have a client that it's clear that it goes back to that kind of, you've got a fixed set of skills on the payroll, is that, if the client need is clearly a big CSR program or a big sponsorship piece or a big, whatever it is, think of it, let's say as a CSR program, and you may not have those skills in depth, you've got a choice. You can train your people to get good at CSR, good enough to, do a great piece of work for that client, or you can change the people on your payroll just for that, quite risky, or you can say, well, this is a skill that we don't have in depth, so we'll go out and hire it. You don't sort of, try and pretend that doesn't exist. And it just seems like an obvious thing to do, is to say, well, the client need is this. We can't provide it within our payroll, so let's just go out and hire it, rather than sort of hide it or just sort of think, oh, let's just, go out and get a little bit of help here, and then we'll make up the rest. We'll just, spread a bit of magic dust, a bit of freelance magic dust, get it off the ground, and then we can do the rest. It's not a very sensible way to go about it. And there's one agency that has this way of working, that they'll go to a client that they'll say, okay, we've won this client, it's worth £100,000 a year, let's say, round numbers. Okay, so they win it on January the 1st, and they know that 3 years down the line, it's probably going to go to review, because typically,
sure,
a client may review their thing. And so what they'll do is they'll think strategically and say, over that period, what we'll do is, at our own expense, we'll bring freelancers in. We'll go to the client and say, we think your needs are changing. We don't have the skills to deliver that change in the program, so we'll hire them in at our own expense. And in doing so, they're betting that 3-year period will become a 5-year contract. And so that decision, which may cost them £10,000-20,000, who knows, in bringing a specialist in to supplement what the skills they have, can be turned into £200,000 of extra revenue from the lifetime value of that client. It's really simple. It's smart thinking, and it's thinking of flexible talent in a strategic way to deliver a very, very clear business benefit, because if they don't, they'll think, okay, that 3-year clock is ticking, and then in 3 years' time they'll have to replace £100,000 a year of fee. That's expensive. To win that kind of amount of work will probably cost them 25 grand in new business costs. To pitch 5 pitches to win one, or pitch 3 big pitches to win back that, just to stand still, they're going to have to spend that money. And what they're doing instead is saying, okay, when we pitched to you, we said we'd be your partner, and that's what this means. We're going to put our money on the line to improve our offer to you. And that's a very, very powerful argument. I've pitched a lot of stuff when I was running agencies, and I've said, we want to be your partner, and what you're actually saying is, we just want you as a client forever. It's a kind of, we want the benefit our way. We're not, and clients say, well, when you say you want to be our partner, what does that mean? What are you bringing to the table of your own? What value of your own are you putting on the table to build that partnership? And that's sometimes a difficult, if your thinking is, when I say partnership, I just want a longevity of relationship with you, then that's not partnership. That's one-way street for your benefit. And what this agency is thinking is, right, what we're bringing is skills to the table that we don't have in-house, but we think the client will benefit from. We're strengthening our offer at our expense in expectation of a greater return further down the line. That's clever thinking.
It's the longer term thing. It is thinking ahead, and it's positioning yourself, badging yourself up in the best way possible. But I just think there has to be a way that this can be sorted. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't seem complex. It's something that can be tackled quite easily. Talking of tackling things, you have set up structured mediation.
Yes.
Which, when I was looking at this, I was like, how big of an issue is this? It's seemingly quite a big issue, right?
Yeah. I mean, it comes about, if I run the PR Cavalry, I'm putting buyers and sellers together. Unsurprisingly, occasionally they fall out, and it just happens. And so I would, get drawn in occasionally to try and sort out a bump in the road. And I thought, well, okay, I'm doing this through my own skill set I've acquired over, years in the industry, but I should be doing this properly, get paid to do it rather than do it for free. And so I retrained, I've gone and qualified as a mediator. And so now what I'm able to do, and I'm the mediation partner of the PRCA, is be able to help organizations in two areas. One is solve disputes without going legal. And the moment you fire off that email that says, right, I'll see you in court, and the costs are just going to go, absolutely through the roof once you start, lawyering up with a huge risk down the line that you may lose. But also, disputes are incredibly expensive in terms of emotional energy, management time, distraction for the team, and they're just upsetting.
Yeah.
They are genuinely, I can speak with through experience, having had a long-running dispute with somebody, and it just occupies far too much of your time, far too much of your headspace, too many angry emails that you sometimes you send, sometimes you wiser, cancel, you say, no, I'll just delete that draft and breathe and send a better email. But yeah, you just get into, so, and then you've got workplace mediation, which is where individuals on the payroll are fallen out, and having run agencies, there's a lot of people, they fall out. A counteractor suddenly can't work with the associate director, or people that used to work together well, now they can't be in the same room. And that is incredibly costly for an organization. But, again, management time to solve it, but also the real cost is where you've got disruption or resentment between team members, then, people start phoning in the work, it becomes low energy, there's low, because PR requires a huge amount of emotional input, intellectual input into the work. But mostly, if you're not feeling it, then trying to run a campaign is hard work. It's 10 times harder to run a campaign if you don't believe in it or if you don't like the person you're supposed to be running the campaign with. So you've got a huge amount of friction in the organization, which is costing money. It could cost money in ending up in tribunal, but the biggest risk is the energy of the team just dissipates, gets burnt up in resentment and anxiety. And then the client suddenly looks at his team that when they hired them was, firing on all sick.
Yeah.
And now
something shifted.
Yeah. This is not a team that's working together. I'll put the client account up for review. I'll go and get a team that does work together. And that's a huge cost.
Yeah.
And ACAS, conciliation service, I'm sure you've heard of. I mean, mediation has about an 80% success rate. But only 5% of employees have ever gone through a mediation process. Now, I don't have numbers for how many people right now in PR departments or PR agencies are firing angry emails at each other, across the, between each member of staff, but I imagine it's thousands. And yet, so few actually go to mediation.
Where does it stem from? Is it usually just kind of like stress that boils over, stress of things that?
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to that idea that, there's being asked to do more from less,
right?
Is just a perennial problem. And so, the client that suddenly says, right, okay, guys, I have to cut budget, but you have to deliver more for that. Or, I'm getting a lot of pressure on justifying my PR spend. So, we need to up the ante. We need to see more results. So, you need to work harder. And that and that goes into the organization and, it turns into stress. It turns into friction to say, you have to deliver more. You're not good enough. The client is screaming at me, so I'm screaming at you. And that turns into the PRCA and the CIPR work together on mental health issues. And, I haven't got the numbers in my head, but the burnout rate in PR is immense. And that is coming from that internalized stress of, it's just harder to do the job. And so you've got a kind of doom loop of being asked to do more for less, turning into pressure within the team, turning into resentment, burnout, turning into low energy work, which ends
feedback to the client.
Results for the client are.
So where's the best intervention at that point? Is it when you're being asked to do more for less, and how do you kind of?
I think
push back.
It's the point at which you say, the emails that we're sending each other or the tone of our communications is now so radically different to where it was 6 months ago or X months ago that this is gone too far. That someone goes to HR, or they raise a complaint with a manager, and that the organisation and the individual say, we shouldn't try to solve this ourselves. We need a neutral person to come in and sit the two parties down, providing they think there's a way through. Because mediation doesn't work if one party just thinks I'm completely right and you're completely wrong, and it's my way or the highway. It just doesn't work. So there has to be an acceptance by both sides in a workplace mediation that this can be solved, but we just need some help to unlock it. We need some help to put all the resentment that's gone between us in the past and to focus on a way of working together. And what you do in mediation is people come with positions, I am 100% right on this. You are 100% wrong. You need to apologize. You need to do this. You need to do this. You need to. And of course, the other person thinks, the opposite. But what you need to do is identify, what you want the relationship to look like. What you want a functioning, a restored relationship to look like. And then in between this, you've got that position. This is what, I want the other person to do to make me feel better. And you've got what I want the relationship to be in the future is this. And in the middle is, so what needs to happen is X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And that's what mediation does. It takes the individuals through a thinking process where they come up with the ideas. And what a mediator can or must not, never, ever do is advise. So if you were in the mediation with me and you're saying, David is, I could never say, yeah, you got a good point. Yeah, I think David should apologize to you. You cannot do that. Or I couldn't say to you, do you know what you should do is go to David and say this, this, and this. Mediator never does that. What the mediator does is take you through a line of questioning, which enables you to go, okay, well, I can see that if I want my relationship with David to be restored, then he needs to do this. And I think that's a reasonable ask. I don't think he would object to that. But also I need to do this and this. So you form, and it is not a group hug.
No,
it is not.
It doesn't sound like
very, it. Very, because the individuals are doing all the heavy lifting. But what they're
therapy.
No, I mean I've done mediations where a CEO, a head of marketing, they couldn't be in the same room. The head of marketing been there 12 years. They had a long relationship, and now they simply could not be in the same room together, and were firing incredibly angry emails at each other, and it was just a nightmare. And in 2 hours from starting with both of them kind of like white knuckled body language like this, 2 hours later they were hugging. I mean, I say it wasn't a group hug. It was a very intense 2 hours to get from where they started to, and what they have to do then is draw up an agreement between them, which they both genuinely believe is sustainable. Because there's no point doing it and saying, okay, sorry, I promise, and then just going back to where they were. Because
it's very easy. It's very easy for us to forget, though, that realistically, the people that we're working with, we are in a relationship with, and each relationship has wants, needs, desires, all of these things, and I've seen over the years where people kind of go, things have got tough, so they've tried to turn into kind of, I'm going to be really just professional and courteous, and immediately that reads as, oh, that's a problem, and something isn't working, and so suddenly you're just in this sort of mini war on email of being really professional, but the relationship has been lost underneath.
Passive aggressive, kind of, well, if you think that, then and quite often, I mean, where mediation really kind of starts to unlock in that mediation session, which is a face-to-face session, quite it's high intensity, is that point where someone says, I had no idea you thought that way. I had genuinely had no idea that is how what I did, what I said, you'd interpret it that way. And then you can see then that the person is starting to, where they started that position of, I am 87% right in this and they are 13% right. And, when they need to do most of the heavy lifting. So he's like, maybe I'm 60% right. And you can see those cogs whirring, and then you have to turn that into, well, what does that mean? So having heard what the other person has said, this is that classic, how does that make you feel? But how can you translate what you've just learned into a different way of working that avoids that becoming an issue in the future and resolves that? And sometimes it is simply a case of, I just need you to say sorry.
Yeah.
I just need to look me in the eye, because we're all guilty of, the angry email, the angry SMS, WhatsApp, whatever it is, and all the channels that we've created for ourselves, in Slack, in whatever, all these different ways of communicating, which take us further and further away from that kind of, do you know what? I'm going to look you in the eye and we're going to have this out between us. Or, we're going to have a grown-up conversation that we probably should have had 6 months ago.
I don't want to do you out of a job, but if someone is listening and is kind of going through this moment, right? They're noticing an angry email, or something has shifted. What would be your advice to change that course of direction? What would you say?
I think it's to find a way of broaching the subject, which is, is not kind of, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, but we need to slug it out in the car park, is to say, okay, I think we could both understand that how we communicate looks very different to how we were communicating 3 months ago and 6 months ago. Something's happened here, hasn't there? Is it something that we can talk about? And so, this is, people can mediate themselves, but there has to be that unlocking moment where the other person says, yeah, okay, fair enough. You're right. We probably both need to dial it down. How can we get past this? How can we...
What do you want the relationship to look like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, this is not witchcraft, you can mediate, you can say, we both need to put a step back here. We need to take it down a notch, and maybe sometimes there is that kind of in the organization, there is that person that can be a kind of, amateur or, kind of, amateur is the wrong way of saying it. It can be a kind of mediator without being noticed. There can be just that trusted member of staff that people go to say, am I doing this wrong? It can't be HR though.
Yeah.
It can't be.
Yeah.
And nothing wrong with HR people, love them, but HR people are paid by the organization to represent and protect the interests of the organization.
Yeah.
And if you've got two people who are in conflict, and particularly if one of them is a manager, in a senior manager role who may influence the direction of the HR person or their job even, maybe they are the budget holder for HR, then clearly that compromise.
You feel a fait accompli already.
Precludes the HR person from facilitating that. I mean, HR people can say, I should not mediate. You should go and find a mediator to solve this out, to solve this. And it's very quick. A workplace mediation, even a commercial dispute mediation, will almost never take more than a day. It should be a small number of hours to solve the problem with some prep.
Sure. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
I could sit and talk about the psychology of that because I find it fascinating. Hours. Lastly, what makes you feel accidentally brilliant? There's so many things that you're doing. You've got you're looking at the tricky parts of the industry on the edges and the challenges, but what makes you feel accidentally brilliant?
I don't think I'm brilliant.
No, everyone says this. Everyone says the same thing, and I'm going to have to change the name of this podcast.
Okay. I'm...
you are.
Accidentally better than mediocre. I've come to the realization, perhaps because I bet I'm probably the oldest person you've had on this podcast. Maybe not.
I don't think so.
Maybe not.
No.
All right. Yeah. Well, I think the accidentally, the realization is that it's easier and more fun to relax, to not worry about the outcome. And, with my agency days, running agencies, it was always, win the next client, hit the numbers, partially because I was working for WPP. So, it's like,
hit the numbers.
What are your quarterly numbers with you? Like, and I have a boss in Brussels and a finance director in New York. And this is, you get those emails. And those were, what
you need mediators then.
Yeah. But, and so that kind of having to claw to the next result is something that I'm very happy to have left behind. And it makes life a lot easier. And I would say to anybody who's just like, just relax a bit.
Yeah.
Even if things don't go your way 80% of the week, then, getting to 75% of going, but don't sweat the other stuff. It will come back. It will, if you're any good. But this is just to very quickly, a lot of freelancers, they call me up and say, I haven't got work, can you help me? And I say, I can't change the economy, I can't change the weather, I can't change the government, whatever. The only lever you've got to pull is to keep doing good work for your clients that you've got, even if they're not paying you as much. It's possibly because they're going through stress. And if you can sit down with them and say, look, I understand that you're under the cosh as well. That has an impact on me. But if I turn that into resentment of my clients and they're paying me 25% less, so I'm just going to do 25% less work, I'm going to work to rule, that's corrosive.
Yeah.
And the best lever you can pull, the only lever you can pull, being all available to you is continue to be bloody good at what your job, bloody good at your job and what you're doing for clients. And if things don't pan out, then, that's...
Make a different decision. But build on success.
But don't immediately take that kind of, we need to do things for less as being, well, sod you, I'll do less then, because it's toxic. And, good people win out eventually. Because, most clients, even if they say, okay, well, we unfortunately we can't work together anymore because of this, most clients will try and find a way through that, or they'll try and refer you to somebody else, but they'll only do that if you are committed to doing good work. So chill out is a terrible way to try and sum that up. But if you're focused on just next month or next week or next quarter alone, of thinking that, I'm not winning, I'm not progressing at that scale,
comparing as well to other people.
There is a different time scale. There is a different rhythm there that just do bloody good work, and eventually it will pan out.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Nigel.
My pleasure.